Oke, uh, good morning everyone. Selamat siang semuanya dan good day everyone. Welcome to the afternoon session of the Vibration of Majapahit international webinar. It's presented by the Yayasan Arsari Djojohadikusumo and Penelitian Arkeologi Terpadu Indonesia (PATI), and now this year coordinated by the Udayana University. And this afternoon session, I would like also to remind all of you that this topic is redefine our heritage sites among priority of concerns. Uh, it's my honor to chair this session. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Adrian Perkasa. I'm from Universitas Erlangga, and now currently I'm pursuing my PhD at the University Leiden in the Netherlands. And up until I think more or less 2 hours, I will lead you to this international webinar in this panel. And we also welcoming all of the speakers and discussions for this afternoon. Before I introduce the schedule of our event this afternoon and introduce all of the speakers and discussion, we would like to watch a video from the committee. Yeah, Dirgahayu Majapahit. So this is also we uh, commemorate the birthday of Majapahit. It's already 727 years ago, and this is a Trowulan Majapahit by Klims that produced and by the committee of from the Yayasan Arsari Djojohadikusumo. And right now we turn to the following session. Here we have a welcoming speech or preface by Hashim Djojohadikusumo, the chairman of Arsari Djojohadikusumo Foundation. For you, the time is yours, Hashim.
Greetings from Europe. I'm here in Europe on an urgent business meeting, a business trip. Unfortunately, I can't join you physically at the webinar that all of us are having today. A special welcome to old friends, Professor John Mixich, Professor Peter Carey, Professor Laura Cipriani, and of course, Professor Donovan Raipkima, who I had the pleasure of meeting with a few years ago. We are very much privileged to have this webinar to discuss Majapahit. I've been reminded that my involvement with Majapahit with regards to academic research actually dates back to 2008 when my family foundation, the Arsari Djojohadikusumo Foundation, sponsored the first PATI, the Penelitian Arkeologi Terpadu Indonesia. The first one, Pati Pertama, and I think we've had now 4 Pati expeditions, and we'll be discussing the findings of the latest expedition, I think, during this seminar. And for me, Majapahit holds a special allure, special meaning. According to my family tradition, actually my family dates back to Singosari and to Majapahit. And actually, my grandmother was born in Mojokerto. Her family comes from Mojokerto. And we actually have a family cemetery in Mojokerto, close to Trowulan. And family tradition has it that we are actually part of the Majapahit tradition. So I think it's very important for us to continue. I'd like to say today that my foundation would like to support further Pati expeditions. In the future, we hope that more universities come together to be part of this endeavor. I can only hope that in the future, the government of Indonesia can be persuaded to sponsor more excavation work. You know, I remember visiting Pompeii. The first time was 16 years ago. And at that time, I was struck by the fact, well, I was told that at that time, this was 2004, that only 1/3 of Pompeii's total area had been excavated until that time. And this, I think, dates back to the first excavation, which was, I think, in the 1730s or 1740s, some 270 years ago. So my hope is that we will, this Pati and excavations such like, will continue and will be never ending and will be going on and ongoing until we have more and more findings to report to the public and to the academic world. I would also like to add that our foundation, the Arsari Foundation, has been sponsoring various permanent exhibitions in various locales. 2 in universities, one in the Hasanuddin University in Makassar, the other one Gadjah Mada University in Jogja, and the third one being in Trowulan itself. And we hope to have more, or to let's say create more of these Mandala Majapahits in the future. So I wish you all a very useful and stimulating webinar, and I hope to be able to be part of further webinars and perhaps, I think, more convenient physical seminars in the future. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hashim. Yeah, it's really a pleasure to having you give remarks, opening remarks to our sessions. And yeah, actually, there is a blessing in disguise. Even we cannot uh, in touch physically, but in this Corona time or the pandemic time, we can do that online. And right now, before I turn to the main of our event to introduce the speakers and discussions, I would like also to giving an opportunity for Mandala Majapahit. This is the advertisement of Mandala Majapahit. Mandala Majapahit is really have initiative to facilitate the local product that made by the people in the Trowulan, the local Majapahit, in the local Trowulan, the former capital of Majapahit. And please, would you please turn on the advertisement of the Mandala Majapahit? This is the advertisement of the. This is a social program of our webinar. And is there any video for it or? Oh, okay, it's just you can have many things from that produced by the local people in Trowulan by visiting the Mandala Majapahit. Yeah. Now it is the main event. We are reaching the main event. I would like to read the rules of our webinar today. And if you have a question or wondering with the statement of the speaker and discussion and would like to propose a statement, you can use Q&A feature to ask a question. There is a Q&A feature in your Zoom interface. And if you want to listen the webinar in Bahasa Indonesia or English, please click interpretation. We also provide the interpretation for all of you and choose the language, which language which do you prefer to listen. Jadi silakan mengajukan pertanyaan hanya melalui fitur Q&A yang sudah tersedia atau bisa diakses di bagian bawah layar Anda, layar Zoom Anda. Peserta juga bisa menggunakan fasilitas terjemahan dengan menekan tombol interpretation yang tersedia di layar Zoom. Kami tersediakan terjemahan baik dalam bahasa Indonesia maupun bahasa Inggris. And now let me introduce all of the speaker and discussion for today session, especially for this afternoon session. The first speaker, it's also I really have relation with him since a long time ago. Professor Widjaja Martokusumo. Professor Widjaja was graduated. Selamat pagi Pak Widjaja.
Selamat siang.
Selamat siang di Indonesia. Pak Widjaja was graduated in 1991 from the Department of Architecture, Institut Teknologi Bandung, ITB. And in the 99, was awarded a Doctor Engineer degree in Urban Planning and Design from the Fachbestadt and Landschaftsplanting Universität Gesamthochschule Kassel, Germany. He was appointed since 2013 as the chairman of Architectural Design Research Group, and since the following years, he is a professor in architecture and urban heritage conservation and appointed as a dean of School of Architecture, Planning and Policy Development ITB on 2015. He is currently assigned as a secretary of the school ITB. He was once a visiting assistant professor and lecturer at the Faculty of Architecture, Faculty School Erfurt in winter semester 2008 and 2009, and was a recipient of a Melbourne Asia Visiting Fellowship Program 2015 and 16 at the Melbourne School of Design, Faculty of Architecture, Planning and Building, University of Melbourne. He was also once a visiting professor Erasmus Plus program at the Faculty of Architecture Vilnius Gediminas Technical University at Lithuania in 2018. Selamat siang, Profesor Widjaja.
Selamat pagi, selamat siang semuanya, selamat sore.
Semoga sehat selalu. And Prof. Widjaja is not alone here. I will also introduce his co-speaker in this afternoon session is Ibu. It's also a long time. Since we work together. Ibu Catrini Pratihari Kubontubuh. She has a background in planning and architecture. Graduated her bachelor degree from Urban and Regional Planning of ITB in 1996 and received her master degree from Department of Architecture KU Leuven in Belgium 1997. She is now taking her doctoral study at School of Architecture Planning and Policy Development of Institut Teknologi Bandung ITB. She has a strong eagerness in heritage field, as shown by her activities for more than 20 years in developing heritage organizations in many parts of Indonesia, in West Sumatra, Bali, Jakarta, and several other heritage cities in Indonesia. She is currently the chairperson of the Indonesian Heritage Trust, or Badan Pelestarian Pusaka Indonesia, based in Jakarta, and a member of Board of Executive Committee of National Trust Organization, INTO, based in London. She worked professionally at the World Bank Jakarta office for the period of 2006 until 2012. Before she is appointed as the Executive Director for ARSARI Djojohadikusumo Foundation since 2013 up until now. And she also a founder of Southeast Asia Cultural Heritage Alliance. Selamat siang Bu Ari ini.
Ya.
Saya panggilnya Bu Ari juga ya.
Ya.
Walaupun namanya
Selamat siang.
Catrini.
In one sentence, I'm the student of Professor Widjaja.
Yeah. Hopefully will graduate soon. And the other speaker, we have Hattaya Siripathanakun. He is currently a specialist in cultural heritage conservation at Southeast Asian Minister of Education Organization Regional Center for Archaeology and Fine Art. Yeah, this is really famous for the archaeological and historical subject in Southeast Asia, or SEAMEO-SPADA. Since 2015, she has been in charge of professional development and cultural heritage conservation, focusing on disaster risk management of cultural heritage for 11 member countries in Southeast Asia through capacity building activities and researches in collaboration with other international organizations such as ICROM, UNESCO, and etc. and so on. She has also contributed as a resource person to several workshops, training, and conferences hosted by any Southeast Asian countries. For her 17 years experience since 1998 in working at various Thailand's governmental agencies, especially the Fine Arts Department, Ministry of Culture, the main Thai governmental agency responsible for cultural heritage conservation. She had involved and developed her conservation professional and network. She also provided consultation and recommendation for conservation projects, as well as coordinated several regional activities within ASEAN community. And for her education background, she had a bachelor degree in landscape architecture. Ms. Siripathanakun also holds a master degree in conservation studies from the Universities of York in the United Kingdom, and now is a PhD candidate at Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. In addition, she was elected a Commerce Board member for 2017 and 2020, and appointed as Secretary General for E-Commerce Thailand for 2019 to 20 and 22. Good afternoon, Hattaya.
Yes, good afternoon. Selamat siang.
Oh,
siang. Wow.
Very good.
Very good
Yes.
of you, Hattaya. So yeah, it's a pleasure to having you here, and looking forward to hear from you about the Ayutthaya. Yeah.
Yes, it's also my honor to be here, and look forward to share with you my experience.
Thank you, Hattaya. And move to another speaker. We have Laura Cipriani. Laura Cipriani is currently an assistant professor at TU Delft. Yeah, it's my neighborhood in Leiden, the Netherlands. Since 2012 and 2013, she has taught landscape architecture and landscape urbanism at Venice University, UAV, and at Politecnico di Milano. She also taught at National University of Singapore, at Venice International University, and at Padua University. And since 2014, she holds the Italian Associate Professorship registration in landscape urbanism and was a Marie Curie researcher at the University of Trento. And Laura received a PhD in landscape urbanism in 2008 from UAV, PhD school coordinated by Professor Shetty at a master degree with distinction focused on landscape and urban studies from Harvard University, Graduate School of Design in 2004, attended with a grad and bachelor and master degree in architecture with honors from Venice University in 2001. After working as an architect in London, Milan, and Padua, and collaborating with leading urban landscape experts such as Carl Stenitz, Prof. Italia, Marcel Smith in 2008, Laura founded Super Landscape, a landscape, urban, and architecture research firm. Winner of numerous research fellowships. In 2011, Laura was awarded by the Marie Curie Coupon Fellowship with the European Community 7 Framework Program. In 2002, she was awarded by a research grant by the Foundation CARIVE in collaboration with IUAV University of Venice, which allowed her to graduate with honors in landscape and urban studies at Harvard Design School. Good morning, Laura. She's still in the mute or she's not attended yet. Okay, and I will introduce the last speaker. It's really interesting to having moderating this panel session because it is really interdisciplinary. The last speaker coming from the literature, I really after read many works of him. Professor Toru Aoyama. Professor Toru Aoyama was born in Kobe, Japan in 1957. After obtaining BA and MA at Kyoto University, he was awarded a PhD in Malay and Indonesian literature from Sydney University. Currently, he is a professor of the Indonesian Studies unit at Tokyo University of Foreign Studies. His works include A Prince and Priest in Butantulars, two works in the 14th century of Majapahit, in Memoirs of the Research Department of the Toyo Bunko, the Oriental Library, in 1999. Empu Tantular dan Cakrawala Harapan dalam Kakawin Sutasoma in Sadur, Sejarah Terjemahan di Indonesia dan Malaysia, 2009. And the significance of moksha in the Ramayana reliefs in the light of old Japanese texts, in transformation of religions as reflected in Japanese texts. Good afternoon, Professor Toru Aoyama.
Good afternoon, selamat pagi, selamat siang, dan selamat sore, everyone.
Selamat pagi.
I'm very honored to be a part of this symposium. Yes, I'm very looking forward to share the many our experiences.
Matur nuwun, Professor Toru. I'm using bahasa Jawa. And we also have a discussion here. The discussion, we had a speaker from really interesting and from many disciplinary. We also have a discussion from Udayana University, Professor Wayan Ardika. Right now, Professor Wayan Ardika he is a professor at the archaeological department at Universitas Udayana, and he published many works on archaeology, in history, and in tourism. He worked also in ancient history with Pak Mixik. He wrote many things with Peter Bellwood. Yeah, if I read many books on the prehistory of the Indonesia archipelago, especially with the works of Peter Bellwood, I see many times of Professor Wayan Ardika. Wayan Ardika also write a book about the pusaka budaya dan pariwisata, and many works in prehistoric of Asian, not only in Indonesian. Profesor Wayan Ardika, selamat siang, selamat sore dari Bali.
Selamat sore, selamat pagi Pak Adrian.
Sehat, Prof?
Sehat-sehat Pak.
Matur Suksma telah bergabung. Nanti kita tunggu pembahasan dari semua pembicara dan menarik mendengar pendapat Anda. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. And now in the main session, for the first speaker, because there are two speakers for the session, I would like to invite Professor Widjaja and Ibu Catrini Pratihari Kubontubuh to present their works on Majapahit. Professor Widjaja and Buari, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mas Adrian. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, wherever you are. So can you listen to me, my voice? So I hope that you can listen to me, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, good.
Okay, I would like to say hello again to all the audience. And it is our pleasure to see you all. And I hope that you are all healthy during this challenging period of time. I would like to thank you very much, especially to the organizing committee, for this wonderful opportunity. This is an honor for us to be invited and be able to share some important thoughts in heritage conservation. I know that the domain of this webinar is in archaeology, and as outsiders, we feel very honored to be involved and therefore look forward to having more insight from all of you. So my name is Martokusumo, and together with Ari, my PhD students, we have been working on protection archaeological site in Trowulan, East Java, and by introducing the notion of area-based conservations. Our presentation today is entitled Learning from Trowulan, Majapahit, Challenges on Discourse of Monument-Based Toward Value-Based Approach in Heritage Conservation. In essence, it deals with protection of fabrics which are mostly scattered, looted, fall apart, and damaged over the time. So Ari, I will start to present first, and after your parts, this will be resumed together. Ladies and gentlemen, the discussion on cultural heritage and conservation has developed from time to time, starting with the notion that in the early phase, historic conservation deals simply with the protection of individual building, structure, or other artifacts, while in the second phase, the concern expands into area-based policy. This, in the second phase, reflection of the functional characteristic of areas and the active economic use of the protected building structures and etc. were set up additionally as conservation concerns to the visual, architectural, and historical qualities. Nowadays, the idea of conservation to some degrees has respectively changed, as you all are aware, concerned with both physical and natural environment. So it doesn't merely worship shrine of the past, but more than ever, the idea tries to make it more relevant to the community needs. Yeah. Another issue that is also important is about the current discourse on paradigm shift. Yeah. So there is a paradigm shift, a shift in heritage conservation from monument, object, and physical-based approach toward landscape, subject, and value-based approach. Yeah. On this session, we would like to share experiences from Trowulan, especially the engagement in protecting our cultural patrimony while addressing important issues such as intactness, the conception of cultural significance, and redefining heritage within the paradigm shift. I will now highlight several points to make the big picture of our sharing more clearly. I will start with the intactness. Intactness is a major concern in Trowulan since typologically, The site of Trowulan belongs to archaeological ruins. Some artifacts are still today to recognize, yeah, as intact forms, but in general, most of fabrics are scattered and buried. So those archaeological features have been shattered, looted, and neglected for centuries. And that's why they are very, very vulnerable for destructions. The paradigm shift, yeah, from landscape, subject, and value-based approach, which means that the area of Trowulan is for sure of historical, cultural, and ecological significance. And this value must be superimposed spatially onto the tangible feature of the area. So the most essential development in the heritage conservation movement is that it has expanded its area of interest into dimensions where environmental concerns are more dominant than the historical association of a place. That is the natural and cultural landscape, topography, social and cultural tradition, and other environmental objects. Yeah. So the second notion is about the cultural significance. It is a term that was introduced in the period of 1980s as part of the Bara Charter, and it was defined in the revised edition of the Bara Charter 2013. Cultural significance is understood as aesthetic, historic, scientific, social, or spiritual value for past, present, and future generations. Yeah? Nonetheless, due to the dynamics, cultural significance may change over time and with use. Yeah? Therefore, understanding of cultural significance may also change as a result of new information and socio-cultural dynamics. Yeah? So unlike the mainstream international approach, mainstream means dominantly focus on physical performance, immaterial qualities must also then be taken into account. Yeah. And the last issue is there is an opportunity to redefine our heritage. Yeah. So to redefine our heritage should not take place only within the effort of place or identity making. Yeah. Moreover, within redefining, we are in the opinion observing priority of concern is a necessity. Yeah, we need to rethink the way we live socially, culturally, and economically in historical urban areas. The symbiosis between its landscape and the people. Yeah, so that I think that the introduction of the notion of what we call an area-based conservation in the special case of Trowulan is considered appropriate. Yeah, it is because the artifacts are mostly damaged and shattered in such a way we are in the opinion that the context will or is important due to the unintactness of the fabrics. So those are all the thought that will be furthermore continued and explained by Ari with the help of our cases in Trowulan. So Bu Ari, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Widjaja. Allow me to continue the presentation. But first of all, we share a documentation video from current situation in Trowulan as a courtesy of ARSARI Djojohadikusumo Foundation and the Indonesian Heritage Trust. I will ask the help from the committee. Thank you. I will share again the PowerPoint presentation. So I will continue from what Pak Widjaya already presented to us. I think something went wrong this moment. Okay, I'm starting with the overview of Majapahit sites in Trowulan. So Trowulan has long been recognized as the former royal capitals of the Majapahit Empire, which flourished between the 1293 and the early of 16th century. This is located in Mojokerto Regency in East Java. It counts more than 65 ruins in an approximate 92.6 square kilometer area. And as a former historic site of Majapahit Empire from the 13th century, the sites of Trowulan has experienced changes as follows. So the birth of Majapahit period when as Raden Widjaya, the first king, coronated on the birth of Majapahit Empire in 1293. And then the second period that we call the heyday period, when Majapahit was linked to the international trade and diplomatic network from the first decade of the 14th century. The third period, we call it the decent period, when the fall of Majapahit in the early of 16th century was caused by a series of internal royal family conflicts and also as well the natural disaster. So we quoted this from Negara Kartagama from the year of 1365 and also from the Pararatan book coming from the early of 16th century. The fourth period is the forgotten period, 15, in the so-called the period of forgotten era. And the fifth period passed by Majapahit is the colonial period. During the colonials, when the development of the sugar industry in the late of 19th century, the area Trowulan has been built over and destroyed by uncontrolled urban and agricultural development. And the last period that we know here is after the period of Independence Day until the current time. So Trowulan bequeaths us with the traces of the glory of Majapahit Empire that is no longer intact, as mentioned also by Professor Widjaya, due to its current condition being damaged, ruined, looted. We also try to identify the problems and challenges in Trowulan. So first of all, lack of understanding of heritage value over physical appearance. The Trowulan fabrics are not intact. The limit is physical evidence. And the protecting intact heritage site is already challenging. So we can imagine, moreover, the ones not intact. Therefore, a specific approach based upon complexity is needed in Trowulan. And secondly, uncontrolled urban and agricultural development. Since the archaeological remains are damaged and the rest are still buried underground, it creates many conflicts with recent development. Treat in form of insensitivity of local small-scale brick industry, and also change of uses, intrusion of modernity, and urban dynamics as well. And last but not least, there is also a problem and challenge of the top-down approach, which limit people participation. The mainstream international approach mentioned that there were conflicts among social, cultural, economical, and political. And there are also different perspectives in the development program due to limited access for community involvement. This figure here showing us, so that the left ones, how the Trowulan fabrics are not intact, that limit its physical evidence. And then the one in the middle, the Majapahit Information Center, planned to be built on top of archaeological remains in 2009. So these are all the problems facing in Trowulan. And the right one is an empty Majapahit house due to people barely using them, due to the absence of people involvement in the planning stage of this program. So, and it's also continue. There are a series of another problems and case in Trowulan. Factually, the series of cases in Trowulan happened vary from 1960 onwards, whereas the site have been damaged by illegal excavation, the treasure hunting, and use of the land for producing traditional bricks, and new economic development without proper feasibility studies. In the picture on the left, we can see how the old bricks sold illegally in the Kumitir village on the year of 2017, whereas the other picture in the right, it's showing us found artifact being damaged and may end up sold illegally by the brickmakers. So coming from this, the lesson learned from Trowulan, we can identify several issues as follows. First of all, is conservation in Trowulan should no longer be limited to physical aspect. The area-based conservation, a specific approach in Trowulan, is a shifting paradigm from monument, object, and physical-based approach to landscape, subject, and value-based approach. And secondly, the deep understanding of cultural significance include the archaeological studies, and also have to have the more and wide multilingual knowledge of it. And the third one is talking about the redefined heritage, that is, or revisit our heritage in terms of identity and priorities of concern. And due to the recent issue, such as the modernization, urbanizations, and also the pandemic, so we need to rethink the way we live in this historic urban area, the symbiosis between landscape and people. So these are our lesson learned. And I invite Professor Widjaja again for the closing statement of our presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ibu Ari. Yeah, after given the situation above, we are in the opinion that the engagement in cultural heritage and conservation should be based upon the followings. Number one is the integration of heritage as part of modern policy. So how to make it relevant to the current and the future needs, especially in the contemporary era. And the second one, we do believe that there will be some potential interfaces between the past, the present, and the future. So this is our own task to discuss it, how this would look like, yeah? And with the rising awareness of socio-cultural uniqueness, it must be also supported and enhanced by other aspects. So we do have problems with the environmental concerns, issues, especially during and let's say after this pandemic era. So that would be the three main issues that has to be discussed in the near future. Ibu Ari?
Yeah, and then also finally, we suggest additionally that the current crisis must be seen as an opportunity to rethink the way we live in cities, the symbiosis between landscape of city and their inhabitants. And then the second additional suggestion is for the historic urban area of heritage itself should be redefined in terms of identity and priorities of concern, such as education, the socio-economic, environmental, or even the pandemic issue.
Yeah, I think that's all that we would like to share. Once again, thank you everyone. It is really an honor for us to be here and we receive the opportunity to share with you all. Thank you for having us again.
Terima kasih banyak Profesor
We really on
Widjaja.
time because Professor Widjaja set up the alarm.
Yeah.
Without a timer. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the very punctual and very concise presentation. And
yeah, most welcome, Mas Adrian.
I remind to all the participants, you can use the Q&A if you have any question regarding to the presentation. Now we move to the second speaker. We have Hattaya Siripathanakun from SEAMEO-SPADA, Thailand. Hattaya, now the floor is yours.
Yes, okay. I'm going to share my Can you see the slide I'm showing?
Yes.
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 Books.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My presentation is okay. Sorry. I think I have some issue. Okay. Let me share this once again. Okay. My presentation is actually part of my research on water management of Ayutthaya, an old capital city of Siam Kingdom, which is now Thailand. The presentation will provide a brief information of natural settings of Ayutthaya, so it could be clear how Ayutthaya emerged and developed. Then I will share the historical background of Ayutthaya to show its outstanding universal value and current state. The latter parts of my presentation will be about its protection and management, as well as the challenges the city is facing. Okay, just for some of you who may not familiar to Thailand, Ayutthaya is now one of the 76 provinces of Thailand, where it's located in Southeast Asian Peninsula. You can see the map on your left-hand side. It's the country map. The country connects to Myanmar in the west, Laos and Cambodia in the east, and Malaysia in the south. This animation showing the better presenting on Ayutthaya province and its natural setting. The west and north of Thailand are mountainous areas where all rivers flowing southward to the Gulf of Thailand originate. The province is situated between Chao Phraya River, the main river of the country, and Pasak River, which flows through various ancient settlements. The location of Ayutthaya is also known as Chao Phraya Delta or lower plain of Chao Phraya River Basin. Actually, it is still argued about the precise period of the emergence of Chao Phraya lower plain. On one hand, regarding the landscape archaeological method, it is proof that this area was swampy and partially mangrove ecology, which was excessive by seawater as a result of the Holocene maximum transgression around 8,000 years ago. Then around 7,000 years ago, the seawater gradually recedes. At a certain period, which could be around 10th century, the condition of this land may suit enough for settling down. On the other hand, from the 3rd to 11th century, several other ancient settlements were formed as city-states around the upper central plain of Thailand, known as Thawalawadi. These cities were obviously known for their water management, particularly in irrigation system, which is also still unclear whether it was the adaptation of Indian and or Chinese civilization with local wisdom. It can be seen that these cities were shaped round or nearly round by the city mode. As you see in this slide, Utong, the example of this Thawalawadi city-state, which is Utong, it is claimed that Ayutthaya was evolved from one of these city-states. However, before the establishment of Ayutthaya in 1350, the recent studies show that there were previous settlements in this area which developed to be Ayutthaya later on. One of them is known as Ayutthaya, which is still evidently found at the east of Ayutthaya. If you can see from this slide, it's on your right-hand side. And another settlement known as Patakujam or Vieng Lek is claimed to be another settlement which was located at the south. Actually, these two settlements were located on the other side of the rivers, which encircled Ayutthaya and shaped Ayutthaya like island, which is nowadays called Ayutthaya City Island. So my presentation may focus on Ayutthaya City Island rather than the whole kingdom, but I will give a little bit information about the kingdom. Since 1350, Ayutthaya kingdom became dominant in Southeast Asia after the fall of Khmer Empire and the Mon kingdom. The kingdom flourished from 14th to 18th century. In 15th century, Ayutthaya kingdom occupied the whole southern part of Southeast Asia Peninsula. If you see the map on the left-hand side, it's shown in the purple color, and Majapahit is the green color connecting to Ayutthaya kingdom. So far, the studies on the early period of Ayutthaya is still very limited. It also should be noted that from the European records, Ayutthaya was recognized as a capital city of Siam kingdom. So it's still a little bit confused between the definition of Ayutthaya and Siam kingdom. Anyway, in this presentation, we will talk about Ayutthaya as a city. While the kingdom flourished, Ayutthaya, its capital city, grew to be one of the world's largest and most cosmopolitan urban areas and a center of global diplomacy and commerce. The city was strategically established on an area surrounded by 3 rivers, connecting the city to the sea, while the canal network built to cover most part of the kingdom helped facilitating the goods and wine products from the hinterland to the capital city. Therefore, this location was ideal for international trade. Besides the Southeast Asian ethnic groups who lived in the kingdom, the Europeans, Persians, Japan, and etc. were also settled down in Ayutthaya. Actually, if we see from some map, we can find the foreign settlements along the Chapaya River. But the foreign settlements were allowed only to settle down outside the city wall. On the other hand, this location was chosen not too close to the sea in order to prevent the city from attack. Furthermore, its location and urban structure also protected the city from seasonal flooding, as well as the neighboring armies who tried to invade this kingdom. As mentioned, the studies on the early period of Ayutthaya is very limited. Anyway, thanks to various records done by the foreign visitors who came to Ayutthaya during the 16th to 18th century, so we have quite a number of historical documents about Ayutthaya in its mid and later period. Here are some examples showing collections of the information like cartographies or the maps. I just took one map to show you, but actually there are quite a number of the maps. There are also the picture drawings about the architectural style, people who live there, as well as the way of life and royal rituals. However, it is crucial to keep in mind that these information are from the foreigner's perspective, so they might not be aware of the precision of the detailed differences of the Asian cultures and characters. So from some maps, you can see the character of the buildings in Ayutthaya. It look like the Chinese architecture, but actually it is not.
I'm sorry, Hattaya.
Yes.
Your map is still on the Thailand map, or you already presenting the Ayutthaya map? I mean the building. Because you are still your screen still showing the same map of Thailand and with Ayutthaya and Bangkok.
Actually, I already moved to the slide number 9.
Okay, but
is it moved?
Yeah,
I think we got a problem because it's not moved.
It's not moved?
Yeah, it's stuck in the slide of the map.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe the committee will share the screen from the file that you sent.
Yes. Yeah, you can help me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you help? Okay. So should I repeat or just continue? Okay.
Maybe give a short brief from
Okay.
the slide that in passly that we can explain.
Okay. So can you just go back to the map that I stopped previously that you mentioned this? So actually,
Yeah,
this is the natural setting of the city that I already mentioned. So next, please. And here is the settlement the previous settlements that I mentioned before the establishment of Ayutthaya. It's a Tavaravadi period city-states which Ayutthaya emerged. Next, please. This is the area in the east and in the south of Ayutthaya, which also recently found the previous settlement before the main city was established in 1950s. Next, please. And here is the map of Ayutthaya, which showing the glory of the kingdom at that time that I mentioned about the purple color, which you see in the right-hand side, which is the Ayutthaya kingdom, while below is the green color, which is Majapahit, which shares some period of Ayutthaya. And here, Ayutthaya as a capital city, which I'm going to focus. This map showing the significance of Ayutthaya in terms of the water management system and the value. That's why it's growing to be one of the world's largest cosmopolitan urban area and the global diplomacy. Next, please. And here is the information about Ayutthaya in the past from the European perspective. Next, please. Okay, so we continue with my presentation. The fall of Ayutthaya came in 1767 when the city was attacked and razed by the Burmese army, who burned the city to the ground and forced the inhabitants to abandon the city. Ayutthaya was never rebuilt as a capital of Siam Kingdom in the same location and remains known today as an extensive archaeological site within a contemporary town. In fact, it has been argued that some area of the city probably were rehabilitated a few years after it was defeated and has continued until today. But it's just only some area, not the main part. Next, please. Ayutthaya then became one of the provinces after the modernization of governing system of Siam Kingdom in the early 20th century. Phaya Bolan Ratchathaniin, a royal noble who was appointed to be a governor of this province, did the survey and archaeological work around Ayutthaya, especially the city island, during his service and also after his retirement. The map you are seeing is the map produced by him, which is based on his fieldwork and historical document known as the description of Ayutthaya, which is a kind of a tale from the survival when Ayutthaya fell. It has been used as the main source for the archaeological and historical studies, as well as restoration and conservation until today. Next, please. I think I will come back to this slide once again. Can you just go to next slide, please? Okay, this picture shows the remains of the royal temple, Wat Prasi Sanpet, which was part of the royal palace complex. Next, please. And a few remains of other temples in the city were also rebuilt or restored and continue in religious use, while most temples are kept as archaeological ruins, but new religious buildings may have been constructed, as you see from these pictures. Next, please. And here, the rest of the city island is now a living town where remains of the glorious past can still be seen around the area. Next, please. Okay. Can you go back to the map previously, the aerial photograph? Okay. So I'm going to talk about the protection and management of Ayutthaya in chronological order. In 1872, King Rama V declared the city island, which you can see from this aerial photograph. He declared the city island the public land, which was not allowed a private land ownership holding. He also ordered the archaeological work within this area and restoration scheme for the remains of the royal palace complex. Later, after the revolution in 1932, Ministry of Finance privatized some plots of land for commercialization, while the Fine Arts Department, Ministry of Culture, promulgated 69 individual ancient monuments under the protection of the Act. In 1976, the area comprising the remains of the Royal Palace complex and archaeological high potential areas have been declared to be under legal protection. In 1982, this area was established a historical park, then was inscribed into the World Heritage List in 1991 under the name of the Historic City of Ayutthaya. Last but not least, in 1997, the legal protection has extended to cover the whole city island. Next, please. Next, please. Next. Okay, stop here. So from the earlier photograph, it may not clear to see about the protection system of the Ayutthaya, but from this one, you can see regarding the first phase of the master plan for the conservation and development of the historic city of Ayutthaya, adopted in 1995 and implemented by the Fine Arts Department, the green area is the historical park, which also means the boundary of the World Heritage property, while the yellow area covers the rest of the city island. At present, these two areas has been under protection. Actually, I mentioned that this is the first phase of the master plan because we also plan to extend the protection by the implementation of the second phase of the master plan, which once already completely drafted. The aim is to cover the footprints of Ayutthaya's origin and civilization. As I mentioned, the previous settlement of Ayutthaya is not only at the city island, but it's also the area around the city islands as well. Next, please. Here, this slide is showing the existing management system of Ayutthaya city island. It is obviously that many stakeholders and governmental agencies involved in the management system. However, in brief, it can be clearly seen that the World Heritage property or Ayutthaya Historical Park is fully managed by the Fine Arts Department through its Historical Park Management Office. This office is mainly responsible for all actions within its boundaries, such as conservation intervention, archaeological excavation, and daily maintenance. However, since the whole city island is protected as a national monument, any actions affecting the archaeological remains above and underground, such as digging and constructions, need to be applied for a permission from the Director General of the Fine Arts Department. Next, please. Nowadays, like many other old cities, as we can see for Majapahit as well, Ayutthaya is facing several challenges. This slide shows one of the examples of improper and illegal construction in the city island. This is a remains of one of the ancient bridges built in Ayutthaya period that still exists, but now situated in an area of a university. It was as dry a canal which became shallow and sometimes dry out, so you may not see the canal clearly. The big building seen at the back of this bridge was constructed on the canal, which was filled for land reclamation. Since the canal system is one of the most important attributes of Ayutthaya, of the values of Ayutthaya, so the construction was restrained by the Fine Arts Department, and this is still, this case is still holding and was taken into a court. Next, please. Another challenge of Ayutthaya is from the natural hazards. The changing land use around the area of the city island, low recognition of significance of Ayutthaya, as well as unprepared disaster risk management measures caused the over-expected damages to the World Heritage property when the city was exploded by one of the most severe floods in its history in 2011. After the hard attempt to restore the ancient monuments and temples by the disaster, damaged by disaster, Thailand has been requested to submit a state of conservation report to the World Heritage Committee in order to improve its conservation and management to retain the values of this World Heritage site. Next, please. This is just one corner to show the situation happened in 2011. So actually, in consequences, the master plan of, after we submit the report, the master plan of conservation and development of the historic city has been revised and attempt to include a disaster risk prevention strategy. However, still the government of Thailand has been encouraged to ensure the timely adoption and implementation of this updated master plan and any associated strategies. As I was one of the members of the working group to develop disaster risk management plan for Ayutthaya after 2011, it would be worth, I suggested, to consider the traditional water management system of Ayutthaya in the past, because in its history, Ayutthaya has never been mentioned that it was damaged by flood. Even the city is located at floodplain and always flooded. Next, please. Another decision of the Heritage Committee from the recent meeting is to pursue Thailand to extend the boundary of Ayutthaya World Heritage Property in order to reflect the complete footprint of the city of Ayutthaya. Actually, optimistically, this is not only another challenge, but an opportunity also to review management and protection system of Ayutthaya and implement the second phase of the master plan, which will extend the protected area beyond the city island that I already pointed out, in order to demonstrate and retain the authenticity and significance of this city. If you see this map, the planning is not really aware of the character, the historic character of Ayutthaya, and also it can be claimed that they may not really realize about the values and significance of this ancient capital. So the decision of the Heritage Committee came in the right time because Thailand high-speed rail project has been approved and started, and this is a plan to construct the high-speed train station at the existing train station where it's located on Ayutthaya. Accordingly, the area allowed this station and the east part of the city island are also proposed to build the tourism facilities. And due to this plan, the character of Ayutthaya, as I mentioned, seem to be not recognized or aware. Next, please. So this is a picture of the train station proposed according to the plan previously in the previous slide. It is crucial when considering this design concept, local identity for this overscale train station, which will be built on archaeological site. As mentioned, people and culture of Ayutthaya is blended by various ethnics and cultures. So what the local identity is need to be interpreted clearer on the basis of scientific studies and research. All this construction will not only negatively affect the physical fabrics of the archaeological evidence above and underground, but will devalue the significance of Ayutthaya as the international port city and a center of global diplomacy and commerce. as it inscribed in the heritage list. So actually, my point, my concern that I would like to share with you is perhaps quite similar to what Ari and Dr. Widjaja sharing in their previous presentation. And I will stop my presentation at this point. So thank you very much for your attention and terima kasih.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Terima kasih banyak, Hattaya. It's really interesting to see and to compare how the development of Ayutthaya right now, even it's already recognized as a World Heritage Site. And yeah, I will remind for all of you, the participants, if you have any question, you can just go to the Q&A, click, and then just type your presentation there. And also for the participant for this afternoon session, to get an RA certificate, you can fill the form in the chat room. Then I move to the next speakers. Now the next speaker, yeah, here we are. We have Laura Cipriani. Are you here, Laura?
Just a moment, but I'm uploading the presentation.
Okay. So yeah.
Okay.
So Laura, now yeah, we can watch your presentation, and now the time is yours.
Is it working first? Because I see that the
yeah, it's working. Yeah, it's really well.
Thank you. Thank you all for this invite. We will try to explore together the history of Pompeii in Italy, southern Italy, through the idea of palimpsests. In particular, we will focus on the landscape of representation along the centuries. We will cover three main issues through the iconographic history of Pompeii. The first concept that we have introduced is the land as a palimpsest. What is a palimpsest? And secondly, we will look at the landscape of catastrophes. And what's the meaning in this, in creating a new landscape? And finally, we will look at the palimpsest of representations and discoveries, because Pompeii has had a pioneering influence in the archaeological discipline, and the history of the excavation is also a history of maps, of changes, of techniques, many of which correspond to the evolution of political and different social conditions. So first, what is a palimpsest, and why do we talk about that the land is a palimpsest? If you pick up, for example, this image, which is dealing with the Mississippi River, you immediately see that the river actually changed along the centuries. And all these palimpsests are recorded and written into the land. But also you see that there are many agricultural plots which were written by men. So the land is a constant layering and transforming of the landscape, and this is due by natural conditions, but also due by, of course, man-made conditions. And so this writing the land is like writing into a palimpsest, a text which is always changing and always changes and layers different times and different actions on the land. So the land is really a text, like we say, like André Cobot says, in which we continuously write and scrape and modify the land. But when we talk about a landscape of catastrophes, we have to say that the catastrophe is changing completely this idea of the palimpsest, because we have to say that major cultural change do not occur sometimes gradually, but instead in great sudden historic leaps, commonly provoked by great events like wars, depressions, and even natural catastrophes. And in this case, the catastrophe is an overturning, a sudden end. All of a sudden, you delete a palimpsest of the past, and you're adding something like a tabula rasa, something which starts again, rebuilding. And Pompeii is one of the landscape of catastrophes. We are located in southern Italy, so a very particular site. And Pompeii was an ancient city located in what is next to Naples in Campania region. And the city, along with Herculanum and many villas in the surrounding area, was buried under 4 to 6 meters of volcanic ashes and pumice in the eruption of the Vesuvio in 79 AD. So what we have to see that Vesuvius really played a major role as a natural component in changing completely the palimpsest of the place, but at the same time, it was an excellent example on how a disaster actually preserved the hidden city as it was in Roman times. On August 24th and 29 AD, Mount Vesuvius literally blew up its top. It spewed tons of molten ashes, pumice, and sulfuric gases. People and really suffocated inhabitants, and Herculanum and Pompeii and Stabia, as well as other sites, were actually covered by this multitude of ashes. An ancient voice of the past reaches out from the past to tell us about this disaster. This voice belongs to Pliny the Younger, whose letters describe his experience during the eruption. And he says that this kind of cloud was like an umbrella pine. It was something like this one. You see the disaster. This is an image of 1944, which was the last eruption which was recorded by Vesuvius. And this image was taken by the Allies forces. So an umbrella pine. And what he also says at those times that really we were in a condition of darkness, and it seems like that the whole world was dying with this kind of blackness of the landscape. You see here the Vesuvius again in the darkness of 1944. And this landscape of eruption, actually, it was recorded for the first time in 79 AD with the eruption that covered up Pompeii. And if you look at, for example, at this image, which comes from the House of Centennial in Pompeii, you see that at those times, nobody was thinking that the volcano was erupting. And you see that the volcano does have a lot of landscape, and there is also a Bacchus with a body covered by bunches, because this was an agricultural land, and Pompeii was an agricultural city. So the first known eruptions started in 79 AD, and starting from there, we recorded many different kinds of eruptions along the history. If you look at this map, which is from 1778, over here you find Pompeii, and you understand immediately that the Vesuvius is a rare example of what is called an enclosed volcano. So the cone is surrounded by a much older crater, which includes also the Flagrarian fields, which are also containing historical remains as well. So it's a very wide volcanic area. And the volcano changed completely this palimpsest of the land. You see that recorded in many representations along the history, even after Pompeii. You see how these fumaroles are coming out, and also the explosions. So this is an image from Turner in the 19th century. And this explosion is actually the main element which changed completely that day and when all the history of Pompeii has started. this is the last explosion in 1944. So the landscape changed because of the catastrophe, because of this kind of disaster. And if we look at the palimpsests on how the land looked like before, we immediately understand that the eruption of August 24, 79 AD changed the geography of the Vesuvian area. Over here, I try to overlay the two layers. The city that was the ancient city, you see that in red. And so we had a different coastline over here. And over the top, there is the current situation of this landscape. When the quantity of the erupted material was such, at both times, was such as to move the course of the river eastwards, and we had an advancement of the coastline, which at both times it was a lagoon. And so all of a sudden we had a completely different landscape. Pompeii and Stabia were destroyed and buried under a blanket of lapilli and ashes. Herculaneum instead was submerged by a river of mud. So the palimpsest was completely different, and these kind of changes were recorded along the history, even by painters. Look at here, over the top you see that it was an agrarian landscape, and then all of a sudden this landscape does change again. And these changes are also facing the cone of the volcano itself, according all the historical times. And when photography came out, the palimpsests were very easy to record and to understand how this change took place in the landscape. The third element that we want to focus is that Pompeii, like we said before, has had a pioneering influence in the archaeological discipline. And the history of the excavation is a history of changes and developments in techniques, which correspond to the evolution of political, social conditions, and of course of representations as well. So we can actually record the layering of cartographies which are actually coming with different concepts of conservation as well. We said that Pompeii was buried, but the memory of Pompeii was not forgotten for a long time, because it was recorded actually in many maps and also in literature reviews. It was not a forgotten word, even though the official discovery of Pompeii comes from 1st of April 1748 by a Spanish military engineer, Rochjardin de Cuvier, which makes some excavations. And the imagery that you see, what you are very surprised that it's not only a matter of remains, but it's a matter of land, the matter of the soil, which is layering over the top of Pompeii. Look at these images, you really see the layering of the process of the soil, and which is actually something like 6 meters height sometimes. And the first scientific excavation was made by Carl Weber. And Carl Weber was a Swiss engineer, an architect, an archaeologist, which did not record the landscape. He actually recorded the objects, the architecture, the amphitheater, the detailing of the architecture, the floor mosaic. He was looking at representing the objects that he was going to find. We had to wait to the following scientific excavation by Francisco de la Vega, who started recording this excavation into maps, into the territory over here of Herculaneum, and in understanding how the system was part of more geological and volcanic land. In 1778, Giovanni Battista Piranesi is a very famous architect who was fascinated and captivated by the antiquities of Pompeii. What he's actually adding is actually that it's not only a matter of the remains, but it's a matter of the ruins. Architecture is linked to the idea of vegetation, and it's inserted into the landscape. So the fascination is coming of the combination of nature and architecture. And this was recorded also in some maps where he is representing the river, the countryside, and the objects of architecture as well. All the other maps, you will see that all of a sudden Pompeii is coming out, and Pompeii is going to be visible into the countryside and with these walls and with this kind of different representation of the land. But if you look, for example, of this representation of the 1830s, you will see that on the back, on the lower part, you will see that it's not only a matter of the map, it's also a matter of the ruins, the fascination of vegetation with architecture into the landscape. And all the people which were coming from Northern Europe to Southern Italy were fascinated by Pompeii, but also by the eruptions, by the geology, by the fact that it was still an active process of layering the land and changing the landscape. Starting from 1860s, actually this map represents a very good shift into a kind of scientific documentation. Giuseppe Firelli was the first one who divided the city into the present 9 areas and blocks and numbered the entrances of the individual houses, so that each is identified by these 3 numbers. He was the first one who had a kind of scientific method in which he recorded the maps, and also he recorded and published many publications on Pompeii, as well as he made a huge model in scale 1/100 of Pompeii, where he was adding many elements of the cities which were going to be discovered. He was also the one who, for the first time, he realized that there were spaces left by the decomposed bodies, and so he devised the technique of injecting plaster into them to recreate the forms of the victims. So the land, again, was producing in some way a witnessing what was happening that day in 79 AD. And this is how these victims are still present on the site. With the coming of photographic survey, of course, we made more scientific explorations of the land, and it was possible to record this land much more in detail and to understand how this landscape was formed and changed. But if you think about the history of Pompeii, of its discovery, most of the times we were dealing with Pompeii in itself, not with the landscape and not the surrounding landscape. Over here you see the Cardus and the Decumanos of Pompeii and the structure of the Roman city, how it was left that day. And archaeologists also defined all the urban phases and the developments of the city, as well as along the centuries there were many excavation phases which defined many different areas in the discovery of Pompeii. Everything was thought for an urban pattern of Pompeii, so only the heritage site to understand the urban pattern, to understand the buildings, to understand how this land archaeological site was actually the epicenter of the interest of the people. And of course, we are talking about a site which is in some part unique also because we are talking about 79 AD, and the conservation in some way is still magnificent for what we saw. But conservation, well, what happened then? That starting from the 60s, what we experienced is that Pompeii was not anymore necessary for doing new excavation, but it was necessary to have restoration of what was already discovered. And starting from the 60s, the 80s, the 90s, we really had a decline of the conservation state of this place. This is an image from 2010, so 10 years ago, and it's actually the collapse of the House of the Gladiators, which marked a very important moment in the history of the conservation, because starting from here, the European Union allocated a loan to safeguard excavations. And what came out from this was a grand Pompeii project, so a very big project, which was dealing not only with the conservation, but also with a new phase of excavations, and a new phase which was trying to look new technologies as well as new disciplinary collaborations, and of course new discoveries which came out.
I'm sorry, Laura, sorry
yes.
to interrupt. Almost, it's more than 20 minutes.
Okay, so I will just go ahead and we'll briefly end. What was very important with the grand project is that actually Pompeii changed completely, not being only the historical site, but it was became a part of a big development as an epicenter of transforming the landscape, in particular the ecological, to enhance the ecological, economical, and historical values. So it's a new way of rethinking the historic site, not as an object, but in a more complex system which can enhance completely the territory into a global view. And over here, it's very much needed, especially in Campania, in southern Italy as well. So representation and conservations are creative arts. Maps are not only to interpret the world, but to transforming, and palimpsests are part of it. Thank you. Sorry for being late.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. It's really interesting to see the concept, the land as palimpsests, and yeah, we are looking forward to discussing about it. But for now, we are going to have Professor Toru Aoyama as the last speaker for our session, and also there is a discussion from Professor Wayan Ardika. But now, Professor Toru Aoyama, the time is yours.
Okay, hello. Hello. Okay, my name is Toru Aoyama from the Tokyo University Foreign Studies, and I'm very honored to be today's speaker. Okay, I start sharing my slides. Can you see my slides now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, very good. All right. Okay, now let's start. Right. My team, actually, I'm different from other archaeologists presenting today's sessions. I'm specialized in literature and also religious studies in Java. So my theme is now today is about how literary text can contribute to a better understanding of Majapahit. Javanese literature, which are represented in Old Javanese, Middle Javanese, and Modern Javanese, is a rich source of cultural and historical materials. And major literary works produced in the Majapahit period include the Statoma, Kakawin, which is my main topic of today's session, and the Deshavarna by Mupu Prapancha. So today's presentation explores the significance of the Statoma Kakawin and attempts to situate the work in the social context of Majapahit based on the descriptions in the Desha Varnana. So what is the Stasoma Kakavin? The story is very simple. The Prince Stasoma subdued the Porushada, a man-eater, and restored peace in the world. And this belongs to the genre called Kakavin in old Javanese literature, which generally dealing with kind of epic story in character and composed in verse modeled on the Indian meters. Now, this is a kind of large work. Stasoma Kakavin, the large work with the 148 cantos. And the work was probably produced between 1365 and 1389. So what is called the heyday of the Majapahit in the 14th century. And then author is Mupu Tantral. He was a court poet in the kingdom of Majapahit during the reign of King Rajasanagara, or usually known as Hayamuruk. Okay. Now, what is so remarkable about the Stasoma Kakavin? There are three things I'd like to present. The first one is the Stasoma Kakavin tells a story in the milieu of Buddhism. And second, unlike many other Kakavin works, the story of Stasoma Kakavin is not just a translation or an adaptation, but an original composition. So it's kind of an example of a literary innovation. And thirdly, the type of Buddhism in the Stasoma Kakavin is Tantric Buddhism or Vajrayana. So now look at the Buddhist aspect of the Kakavin. Almost all the Kakavin works tell stories in the milieu of Hinduism, such as Ramayana or the Bharat Yuddha, which is based on the Hindu epic Mahabharata. Now, in contrast, the Stasoma Kakavin tells the stories in milieu of Buddhism. These are quite simply told that the core plot and the protagonist's name is taken from a Buddhist Jataka story, which is a collection of the stories of the Buddha's former lives. And also the Prince Stasoma is an incarnation of Vairochana. The Vairochana is the foremost cosmic Buddha. And then we talked about this later more. And Stasoma pacifies the evil, not by violence, as many Kshatriya like Rama or Pandavas do, but he pacifies the evil by non-violence, ahimsa, which is very much the Buddhist. Okay, now the second point is that the story of the Stasoma Kakavin is original. Now this is a bit difficult to explain, but I try my best. Now, most of the Kakavin works generally can be classified as a translation or adaptation. The best example of translation in a broader sense is that the Ramayana, which was the first Kakavin produced in the 9th century and preserved in the manuscript form until now. This follows the Sanskrit poem Bhattikavya, which is again, in turn, an abridged version of Valmiki's Ramayana. And many other Kakavins actually adaptations, or you can call it a kind of branch story or kind of spin-offs in modern times. So the stories are set in, let's say, in the universe of the Ramayana or Mahabharata. Now, the Stasoma Kakavin does refer directly or indirectly to other sources, of course, either Hindu or Buddhist. But however, in contrast to other Kakavin works, the Stasoma Kakavin can be classified as original because it is not a translation or adaptation of any single existing work. Then also the story is not set in the universe of Ramayana or Mahabharata. Now, here we have to talk about, look into this particular element called yuga. In Hindu cosmology, the cyclic cosmic time consists of 4 yugas or ages. They are the Krita, Treta, Dvapara, and Kali in the order of declining order and morality. For example, the Ramayana is set in the Treta Yuga and Mahabharata is set in Dvapara Yuga. Now, in contrast, the Stasoma Kakavin story is set in the Kali Yuga. The Kali Yuga is the 4th and the last, and this is the age of confusion and corruption. And more importantly, the Kali Yuga is the age in which the reader lives. So it's kind of a contemporary world in a very broad sense. Now, the third point is, and which is most important here, is that the Buddhism in the Sasoma Kakawin is a Vajrayana. Vajrayana is an advanced stage of the Mahayana Buddhism, and it is highly ritualistic and characterized by several features. There are kind of many technical words here, so I just go through very quickly though. Now, first, the practitioner of Vajrayana it has to be in yoga or meditation with the use of mantra, incantation, and mudra, hand gestures. Now, he usually uses Vajra, which symbolizes the indestructibility and irresistible force. And Vajra, importantly, the Vajra can be formed by a hand gesture or mudra. And usually the practitioner of Vajrayana also utilize the mandala or cosmic design diagram with the main deity in the center and surrounded by the four deities located in the four cardinal directions. So in the Vajrayana, the cosmic Buddha or Mahavairochana, or called Vairochana, is repeatedly shown as the central image of the mandala. And all these things actually are focused in one concept, which is advaya or non-duality. And based on the idea of shunyata or voidness, a very quintessential notion in Buddhism, indicates the ultimate oneness of the two distinct entities. So this is a kind of basic background of the Vajrayana. Now we look into how they are employed in the Sasoma Kakawin. Now, firstly, the Vairochana, the cosmic Buddha, is incarnated as Prince Sasoma to bring peace to the earth by pacifying the man-eater King Porshada. So from the beginning, we are actually introduced to this very Vajrayanistic concept. And then later, the Prince Sasoma, he goes to the summit of Mount Meru, and through meditation, he identifies himself as Vairochana. So this again, the kind of advaya, you see, identifying oneself with a kind of supreme being. And then after this episode, he goes into the mandala-shaped garden, and he got married to his wife. So Sasoma becomes in union with his consort, which symbolizes the oneness, advaya, of Vairochana, which symbolizes wisdom, and his divine consort, which symbolizes compassion. Now, in the final scene of this Sasoma Kakawin, there's a famous word or phrase declared by gods, the Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, which is, of course, the national motto of the Republic of Indonesia, which means they are the two, but they are different, but they are the one. Now, this indicates that oneness, but in the context of the Sasoma Kakawin, this phrase indicates that the oneness of the teachings of Buddha and Shiva. So Buddhism and Hinduism are ultimately the same, pointing to the same truth. And in these moments, the Vajra appears from the Bodhyagri Mudra of Sasoma in meditation. So all these elements actually point to the fact that the Sasoma Kakawin is actually written on the context of the Vajrayana Buddhism. We see some pictures here. This is from the ceiling painting at Balekamban, Kelungkung in Bali. And this showing the Sasoma identifies himself as Vairochana. The central, huge, gigantic figure is actually Sasoma being identified as Vairochana. Okay. And then he's surrounded by other, the gods and then his attendants. This one is close to the final scene of the story. Again, the same ceiling painting at the Balekamban. Here, the Sasoma pacifies Porshada, and the Porshada, the man-eater, he himself is actually identified with the Rudra, another form of Shiva, and then he also is in the form of the huge, gigantic shape. This is called Trivikrama in Javanese literature. And then on the left-hand side, you can see the Sasoma, Prince Sasoma, standing, and he's in the state of meditation. And by the force of meditation, he is now pacifying the Porshada, not by violence, but by a non-violent meaning. Now, how these things are can be situated in the context of Majapahit in the 14th century. Now we look into the social conditions of Majapahit. Now here we take up the literary work called the Desha Varnana, or more popularly known as Nagara Krutagama, which is a Kakawin work composed by Mupu Prapancha in 1365. Again, the heyday of the Majapahit. And this depicts the contemporary society inside and outside the court of Majapahit during the reign of King Rajasanagara, or Hayam Uruk. Now we look into the three elements, the Buddhism, and also literary innovativeness, and the Vajrayana aspect. Okay. Now, first, Buddhism. There are many references to Buddhism, but I just picked the three sections from the Deshavarnana. The first one is about the author. I quote, he, the Prapancha, is superintendent of religious affairs for the Buddhists to the king and has succeeded his father. So this indicates the Prapancha is in a position supervising the Buddhist affairs in the kingdom. And this is kind of a successive position. He took over this from his own father. So it's kind of established position, you can tell from this statement. Secondly, about the priest's quarters in the town, in the Majapahit kingdom. On the east are the Shaiva priests, and their head is His Eminence, the Brahmaraja. In the south are the Buddhists, and their head is Abbot of Nadi. So you can tell from this that these priests either Buddhist or Shaiva or Hindu, and they are actually have their own quarters in the capital city of Majapahit, and then they are highly organized with a head person overseeing all the priests. Now, this is not just the Buddhism is not only seen in the capital city of Majapahit, but it can be seen from the outside of the city. There are many references to the sanctuaries. I read, the Buddhist sanctuaries are established as free monasteries, meaning exempted from tax payment, are Bipalalama and Kutihaji and so on and so on. So the place names continue. So they are not just one, there were quite a few the Buddhist sanctuaries outside of the city. Now, second point is about literary innovation. Now, first of all, the Deshavarnana is only non-Kakawin work that depicts the contemporary Japanese societies. All the other Kakawins, like Ramayana or the Bharata Yuddha, they are narrating the stories supposed to be set in India in ancient times, not contemporary Japanese society. But more importantly, I'd like to pay attention to draw your attention to this fact that they are all set in Kali Yuga, means the last and the fourth, and the time age where we live in, the reader live in. I quote, for he, this is King Rajasanagara, had realized how difficult it is to protect the world in the age of Kali. And this is why he held fast to esoteric doctrines and observances and was firmly committed to the sect of the Buddhists. A second quotation here. Cattle Mountains Moon 3. This is indicating the number 3179, with the Shaka era, which is equivalent to 3101 BCE, is the moment when they, means Pandava in the Mahabharata story, returned to heaven. And after their return, the Kali age began, and the world became violent and turbulent. Only the divine being who concentrates on the six supernatural faculties of the Buddha could protect the world as God King. So again, the Deshavarnana share the same time with the Stasoma. That is, we are now living the Kali age, the age of confusion and turbulence. And in this age of confusion, only the Buddha or the teaching of Buddha can protect the world. Now, the third point, the Vajrayana. Now, about the king, it is called written like this: the king is present in invisible form at the focus of meditation, and he is Shiva and Buddha, embodied in both material and the immaterial. So the idea is, you see, that the king can be representation of Buddha, but at the same time, he can be the representation of Shiva. So here, the Hinduism and then Shaivism, Hinduism and Buddhism were actually in harmony, and they coexisted. Now, another reference is here. Ken Anrok here. Ken Anrok is he is the founder of the dynasty of Singasari, and the dynasty of Singasari is actually regarded as a precursor of the dynasty of Majapahit. Actually, in Deshavarnana, the Singasari and Majapahit are actually regarded as a one continuous dynastic line. So the Ken Anro is also kind of a very, the origin of the Majapahit dynasty as well. And he is known as the one enshrined in a double temple at Kanungan, and as a Shaiva and Buddhist in olden times. And finally, we have many references to Vajrayana. I quote, as follows, again, let the Buddhist Vajradhara establishment be mentioned in order. And then the names are actually listed after this. Now, the Buddhist Vajradhara is in Old Javanese, it is said, Kasugatan ka Vajradharan. Kasugatan means the Buddhist domain. And ka Vajradharan means the holder of Vajra, or Vajra holders. So ka Vajradharan means a place of Vajra holders. So you can actually summarize that these are actually indicating not just simply Buddhist domains, but rather Vajrayana Buddhistic domains. So, as a conclusion, let's say what we can learn from these literary work are talking about. I'd like to say this: my question here is Majapahit the last Hindu Buddhist kingdom, as we often think about it, or a transition to a new era? Now, the literary paradigm in Majapahit was that of Hindu Buddhist. This is very clear, and don't doubt about that. However, there is an undeniable momentum for literary innovation can be seen. First, inclination toward Buddhism, not Hinduism, and sophisticated understanding of the concept of Advaya, as you can see in the phrase Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, and aspiration to record contemporary social matters, not just talked about the old ancient times and Indian heroes, but there's some kind of a desire or aspiration to record their own society. So this kind of the continuation of these kind of ideas would resurface in the Islamic era. Now, we can see in Mataram literature, we can see the concept of Kawala Gusti, or mystic union of one and the Lord, or many Baba texts in Islamic literature, which are court chronicles. So, in conclusion, I'd like to share this my understanding of the Majapahit time is that Majapahit is not only the last of Hindu-Buddhist kingdom, which it was, but also a society of transition to a new era. Thank you very much.
Ya, terima kasih banyak, matur nuwun sangat. Thank you very much. It's really interesting to read and to using literature as methods to reconstructing the past, especially in the Majapahit period. And thank you for all the speakers. And now I'm moving to the discussion. And I think there are already a conversation in the question and answer session, in the question and answer forum. Yeah, all the speakers and the participants can conversation to asking anything there. I think relating or regarding to the presentation. I would like to invite Professor Dr. Wayan Ardika to speak and to respond to discuss the topic from the first speakers to the last speakers. Professor Wayan Ardika, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. We learned a lot about this session. We traveling from Trowulan to Ayutthaya in Thailand, and then we go to Pompeii, and we come back to Majapahit again with Professor Aoyama. Okay, so Professor Widjaja just made the point that we should shifting paradigm in conservation of the heritage, not only on physical or monument basis, but conservation should be also include the landscape, the environment, and then we also need to conserve based on the value system. So in referring to the paradigm integrating the heritage and the environment, I propose that we should see Trowulan as a mandala, as also Professor Aoyama mentioned just now. And in that situation, that the heritage should be integrated with landscape, particularly with the mountain, with the sea, and so forth. So my experience when I studying the mandala in ancient Bali back in the 12th century, the imply of the mandala concept was also made a lot of change, particularly the orientation. In the northern part of Bali, particularly in the Buleleng Regency, that the mountain which is located in the south, they call it Kaja, toward the mountain, and the Bali Sea, which actually located in the north, they call it Klod, Segara Kidul. So since the 12th century, when the mandala was applied by King Jayapangus in Bali, the orientation also changed. My question is whether that such phenomena also occurred in Trowulan. Following the session in the morning, the new discovery at Kumitir, it was mentioned that the orientation is toward the Mount of Penanggungan. That's very interesting. As I mentioned before, the mountain, the sea should be considered when we try to conserving the heritage in Trowulan as well. And one interesting thing to me, the Segaran, the word Segaran remind me with the word Segara Segara is means sea, and is also associated with south, with Kidul. So Segaran in the Trowulan is located in the south. So the archaeological finding also indicating that a lot of material have been discovered close to the Segara, so in the south. And further north, we might have some shrine or chandi and so on. So that's my opinion in relation with the how we conserving heritage in relation with the environment and the landscape. Another interesting point was made also by Professor Widjaja and Ari is redefine our heritage by understanding its cultural significance. As we know that Majapahit is the biggest kingdom in Indonesia. Majapahit unified the island of Indonesia, the Nusantara, spreading from Sumatra to Moluccas and to New Guinea as well. So, which is very similar with the territory of present-day Indonesia. So that's also inspiring our present and future development in Indonesia. Majapahit also having a good connection in terms of diplomacy with other state, other kingdom in Southeast Asia, such as Champa, Thailand, and Cambodia, and so on. So this is also very relevant with the Indonesian policy, current policy, and also the Asian country just now in Southeast Asia. So a lot of things should be considered in conserving the Majapahit, the Trowulan, to inspiring present and future development of Indonesia. Another thing that Majapahit was also a great maritime kingdom, and President Jokowi just declared that Indonesia exists as a pivot of maritime connecting the Pacific and the Indian Ocean, something like that. So a lot of things are very significant in terms of value and cultural significance of the Majapahit. So we need to conserve it. And one thing we shouldn't forget that we should include the local community in preserving Majapahit. So community-based conservation, something like that. Because the local people is very important, and we know that Catrini just mentioned before that there are a lot of contestation or vested interest going on at Majapahit. So we should educate the local people that Majapahit is our example, our glorious kingdom in the past, which inspiring present and future development in Indonesia. And from Hattaya, we learn about the Ayutthaya. Last year, during the SPAPA conference in Bangkok, I visited Ayutthaya, and what I learned from my visit Ayutthaya, there are a lot of canals in Ayutthaya, and Hattaya just mentioned there's also the heritage. The Ayutthaya city was very often flooded, and in Trowulan we also having a canal system, but not only for the irrigation itself, but also I think in managing the natural disaster such as flood and so on. So there are some interesting points from the Hattaya presentation. And one thing I remember when we visit Ayutthaya, Ayutthaya was developed as the multi-ethnic city, yeah. The European living there, the other ethnic group also living there. The same similar phenomena with Majapahit. During the Majapahit, there are a lot of Muslim people living in Majapahit from, I think, from the beginning of the emerge of the Majapahit. There was already Islamic people there, so it's a kind of a multi-ethnic, multicultural city, something like that. From Professor Laura Cipriani, we learn about Pompeii. Yeah, this very interesting thing that the eruption that caused also changing of the landscape. And as we know that Indonesia is located on the fire ring, we got a lot of volcano which is still active, and some of them have destroyed the site, such as what we have in central Java, Liangan site, which is also buried by the eruption of Merapi. And the other thing is the Tambora in Sumbawa, which was erupted in 1815. The ashes of Tambora, when it was exploded, also reached Europe. And at that time, Europe also died. And I think Tambora having a great impact, not only in the local people, but also the entire of the globe. And my colleagues also told me that Rinjani having also bigger explosion, but more study needs to be done. What the impact of the Rinjani explosion? And to me, it is good for the Indonesian archaeologists to think about the archaeovolcanology. So because we got a lot of site, a lot of monument has been buried because of the volcanic activities. And the last but not least presentation from Professor Aoyama, it is very interesting to me that just now I learned that Sutasoma was not the adapting story from the Bharatayuddha or Ramayana, but it is a indigenous literary work, so based on the local situation. And from Bharatayuddha, we are Indonesian people also use as our motto, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, diversity in unity. And Professor Aoyama also mentioned about the concept of Advaya, the oneness. Yeah. So there is no difference between Sivaism and Buddhism. And another interesting point that Professor Aoyama mentioned, that Sutasoma was composed during the Kali Yuga period, during the chaotic period at that time. I think this is very interesting. Why? So what is representing of chaotic or Kali Yuga during the Majapahit era? Because the Sutasoma itself was composed in 1365 and 1389. So during the golden age of Majapahit. But at that time, the catastrophe, the Kali Yuga, the chaotics, it's already imagined by the people at that time. So what kind of chaotics? So we learn from Negara Kertagama, from the inscription in Majapahit period, there was a internal conflict among the relative of king itself. So that was one of the chaotic. And also it could be possible because of the coming of Islam to Indonesia, to its Java, and which caused also declining of Majapahit. So I think that's what I can say. So again, thanks a lot to the all speaker for interesting paper that you delivered, and I learned a lot from that presentation. I think that's all, Pak Adrian. Thank you very much.
Matur suksma, Professor Ardika. Thank you very much, Prof. Ardika, for the discussion. It's really interesting story and remind us that we are really similar, like what Mpu Prapanca wrote, to traveling Desa Warnana, traveling to other, but not to other desa, but to other countries, even to the world, traveling to the world right now. From Trowulan, we are going to Ayutthaya, then to Pompeii in Europe, and then back again to Indonesia. And there are actually many questions. Now we are in the discussion forum, but I will take my liberty and privilege as a moderator or a chair in this session. I want to ask to all the speakers and also the discussants that are there any contribution to the history or the study of Majapahit from your research, or from your current research or the previous research, or from your disciplinary? So if there is any contribution, and what kind of contribution is that? I think this question is for of the speakers and discussion. Pak Widjaja maybe can go first.
Ya, terima kasih. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ya. From our point of view, so we are not archaeologists. No? As I mentioned before, that this webinar is, I would say, this is the realm of the archaeology. No? But we feel honored to be able to share something in our perspective as outsiders. No? So my background is in architecture, and my student, Ibu Ari, is a planner and studied also architecture. Yeah? We have seen that we would like to offer, actually, a different way of seeing and thinking on cultural heritage. Yeah? So we have seen that there is a close relationship between landscape itself, so the physical entity of the landscape, the site, and people and the social system, what is also commonly discussed as a cultural landscape. And it is to understand that conceptually, the landscape itself, it's not just a physical product, but rather it is a cultural process. So in this case, we would like to see that beyond the physical aspect, beyond the concept of materiality, there will be also several notion, values that have to be taken into account when we are going to protect, when we are going to keep our legacy. And that is what is lacking, because the mainstream approach, the traditional approach is really physical based. It's this monument based approach. So it is a very sacred thing, so that it is an exclusive. It's an exclusive things, So the future, when we are talking about people-centered, about development that focus on orientation to the needs of the contemporary society, then maybe we have to think, we have to rethink and revisit the existing conception of intactness, as we mentioned before, cultural landscape, cultural significance, and the last one is the need of, or the opportunity to redefine what do people understand about heritage. That would be my opinion. Ibu Ari, probably you would say something.
Okay, I'm just adding just small things regarding how to rethink, redefine, or revisit to having a new interpretation about what is Trowulan in this current time and also in the future, because we understand all is happening is in the dynamic way, and the change is always happen. So the management of change of Trowulan, as Professor Widjaja mentioned, it have to be in balance about not only the physical thing, but also non-physical things that we have to integrate it together. So Trowulan as ruins, as something incomplete and no longer intact, is still having a great value, an important value for all of us. So through this research, we keep promoting for all the stakeholders and all peoples to open again our mind that we need to conserve Trowulan as a Majapahit heritage. Thank you.
Thank you. And how about you, Hattaya, comparing to Ayutthaya? We are facing actually the same challenges.
Yes, actually, I think what Ayutthaya may contribute to Majapahit can be said into two perspectives. The first one is about the understanding of the city. Actually, I already mentioned that this presentation is part of my dissertation. In my dissertation, actually, it's not about the study of Ayutthaya as a history, because as Dr. Widjaja, I'm not the archaeologist or historian. So I try to develop the methodology to understand the system, the water management of the city in the past, which I think this can be also contribute to the other settlements or cities which share the same character, because actually even Ayutthaya is not as ancient as the site in Egypt or in other part of the world, but the remains, the traces of the city is very limited, and we don't have enough information. So what we try to understand, we need to do like a comparison to other settlements which already have some evidence. I think in the research, we try to compare the system with the system in India or in China, as we know that Ayutthaya influenced from these two main cultures. So I think this is something that for Majapahit in the future, if there will be the what we call comparative study with the other similar settlements or cities, it could help for the clearer and deeper understanding. The other point is about the conservation. I think actually it's for Ayutthaya, as the conservation started a long time ago, so the conservation discourse was conventional, and at that time Ayutthaya was acknowledged as the archaeological site. So people were removed from this city, and the park was established and the fence was put. So it separates people and the heritage site. But actually, after I think 30 years, the perception and the conservation discourse already shift from the past. So now I think we need to engage more people for the sustainability of the site. As you can see, Ayutthaya is very large as a city. So we may be not able to protect or to look after the whole site without any cooperation from people who live around. So we need the collaboration with people. I think this is something that Ayutthaya may be a lesson learned from Majapahit for the future conservation policy and protection. And the issue is that how people at the present day can live in the archaeological site. I think this is the issues that we need to figure out. And actually in Thailand, but not for Ayutthaya, we try to introduce the community archaeology or public archaeology to this kind of area, the old town. We still have the archaeological evidence and heritage, cultural heritage in the city, to engage people and give them more awareness on the protection of the site. So I think that this is, I think we can contribute.
Thank you very much, Hattaya. Yeah, and how about you, Laura? Do you think that the concept land as palimpsests also can be implemented, or can be seen as a perspective to see the Trowulan or Majapahit site?
For sure, I don't come from your culture, but I had the glimpse of the Asian glimpse in Malaysia, and from my perspective, actually, Eastern Asia does need the social component much more of the European sites. And what was said at the very beginning, the comments on looking for the tangible and the intangible components of the historic sites. For Asian in general, my perception as a foreigner, as a Westerner, was that in your cases, it's much more in need of what we need. In Europe, in 2000, actually, we had the publication of the European Landscape Convention, that probably you know about that, which tried to include the social dimension in the perception of the landscape, which is not only the palimpsests, the physical territory, of course, but it's a much more complex concept, which is very difficult to include, actually, because who is going to decide who are the population we are talking about? Do we really talk about local populations? In Europe, it's very tough to do this. With regard with this concept of the social dimension, the Pompeii case would be very interesting as well. Why? We haven't seen through the images, but we are located in the southern part of Italy, where we are talking about an area of this country that does have many problems linked to the society first, linked to criminal activities, which are also taking into account which are actually affecting the landscape also ecologically. It's one of the most polluted areas in Europe. So you understand that if there is not a change in the society and you don't start with some projects which are trying to rethink the landscape, you're not going to change the conservation. So to come back, Pompeii and the Grand Pompeii project, which was funded by the EU, could be a first intervention on rethinking not only the historical heritage, not only the isolated element, but to include the historic site into a bigger and broader picture, which does include the territory and includes, first of all, the society, because we are talking about a very particular site, I would say, in Italy and in Europe as well. So very polluted, and where criminal activities are linked actually to these problems and issues. So there are some similarities in some way that society can be included into the conservation process.
Yeah. It's also addressing the question for you. And to the next speaker, what do you think, Toru?
Oh, yes.
Professor Toru. Yeah.
Right. Well, since I'm not the archaeologist, but I have just make two additional comments to, especially the towards the comments from the Ardika about the direction. It's actually, there's a very interesting thing about the direction in Sasoma. I should say this kind of a localization or Javanization of the Indian concept. The story of Sasoma is not about Ramayana, not about Mahabharata, but it's still kind of set in the Indian location. However, location is quite much localized or Javanized. According to the traditional Indian concept, the center of the world is the Mount Meru, and Mount Meru is located to the north of the civilization, where just like Himalaya is located to the north of Indian continent. However, in the Sasoma, when the Prince Sasoma he made a journey towards Mount Meru for meditation, he actually moved towards south. So this is quite interesting indication. You see that because Trowulan is located to the north of the mountainous area, like Mount Kavi, for example. So naturally, the Prince Sasoma, he walked towards the south, to seeking a high mountain where he can meditate, and this actually really show kind of a localization taking place in this Sasoma. A second point is. Thank you for the comment, Professor, that about the tension. The Kali age is an age of confusion. Now, what kind of confusion is anticipated in Sasoma? Actually, this is a little bit difficult question, because in the story itself, it is about the Polshada, the man-eater, as being the source of the confusion, and he attacked many people, and that he abducted many kings and so on. So it has to be pacified. But I wrote another article, and in which I suggested that if you put this Sasoma and also the author's another work, Arjuna Vijaya, put together, and then probably we can put into these two works in the social condition of Majapahit, which is, as you mentioned, that the tension between the eastern palace and western palace of Majapahit. And because this is the time of the beginning of the tension piling up, increasing, and eventually it was it became led to the civil war between the two palaces, and then the palace, one of the palaces were burned down. Interestingly, during the time of the expedition of the Chen Ho, Chinese Admiral Chen Ho's men were actually landed in Java, and they were involved in this battle, and many were killed there. So from this point of view, I just my suggestion to the archaeologists is that I mean, you see, it might be interesting to find the evidence of the kind of burned down palace in the location of Trowulan, and then it might be indicate that this is where the one of the palaces were built. Yeah, that's all from me.
Okay, thank you. It's also addressing the question from Pak Widjaja actually. And Professor Ardika, do you want to add any comments? What I think beyond archaeology, what do you think that they can be contribute to the study of Majapahit?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, that the Majapahit is one of the example, the biggest, the largest kingdom in the past, and I think Majapahit is also controlling the spices trade at the time, because before that, the foreign trader from my research in the northern coast of Bali, they just stop at Chula in northern coast of Bali. No other, I mean, Indian artifact was found further east from Bali. But when Majapahit emerged, I think one important thing, I think, for them is to control the spices from the original, from the Moluccas area, and also the sandalwood from Timor, Sumba, also traded to the west. And I think that's also a great achievement for Majapahit, and we should again learn from Majapahit how they can manage to control the sea, the maritime, which is I think very important for us to the present time in implementing that Indonesia becoming part of the maritime in the world. I think that's all, Adrian. Thank you.
Thank you, Ardika. I think we have running out of time. Actually, we are passing the the end time of 5 minutes. Yeah, it's already 6 minutes. We just passed the actual ending time. But I think I will also give an opportunity for all of you that for the speakers and discussion. That do you think that there is still have a question that you haven't responded yet? You can give a brief response, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah, I think on the forum, in the question and answer forum, we all of you have already responded, and maybe the last question, yeah, from Pak Widjaja in the chat room for Professor Aoyama. It's interesting presentation. Based on your scientific experiences, what literatures do you suggest us to understand the condition of the city of Trowulan or Majapahit? Thank you. Professor Toru Aoyama. Yeah.
Yes, I was reading the chat now. Yes, thank you very much. Well, talking about literature, there are not many, from the time of the Majapahit, but I of course they took the Stasoma as the most important one, but also of course the Nagar Krutagama, or also known as Deshavarna, is the most important literary work, and I think it has been translated into English twice, and Indonesian as well. But I think this is the most important literary material we have to work on further. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think that's all of our discussion. And thank you very much for the fruitful discussion. It's really fruitful, and for your explanation, and also for the participant who were also very active to giving a question and also responding, and even respond the answer from the speakers and discussants. Right now, I would like to invite for all of you to turn on the video because we have, it's typisch Indonesian, a photo session. Yeah. Maybe the committee, Mas Hashim or Mbak Iren, can assist us.
Okay.
And please. Yeah.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Please please smile. One more, I think. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Thank you very much for this really very interesting and many things actually we can learn from each of your presentation and the discussion. For me, as a chair or moderator for this session, I don't have really enough words to give the conclusion. Yeah, but just briefly, I think I need to end the session by proposing a question for all of us. We know already that we have many perspectives and also many research based on our case studies, and Majapahit, Trowulan, and also from Ayutthaya, from Pompeii in Europe. And maybe we can ask to ourselves, what can we do for the future? I mean, not in the very far future, but in near future, because the term of the concept like collaboration of to do work interdisciplinary is often easy to speak or to talk or to discuss, but it's really difficult to implement it in action, especially in the study or in the conservation or the preservation. So yeah, that's the thing that maybe we can address it in near future. And on behalf of the committee, Yayasan Arsari Djojohadikusumo, Penelitian Arkeologi Terpadu Indonesia, PATI, and Universitas Udayana, I would like to give many thanks to the speakers, to the discussant, and all the participants. Thank you very much. And
Thank you all.
we can
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the translator. Thank you, Widjaja.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's
the
really
committees
important.
and
Thank you, everybody, everyone. Take care.
Okay.
Thank you.
Stay healthy,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.